These are what's making headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump makes himself clear that he is not looking for a regime change in North Korea and that he sees tremendous potential, which he believes that North Koreans will make advantage of. After months of protests, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam withdraws the controversial extradition bill, but the reaction from the Hong Kong public is far from satisfaction. Rather, it's too little, too late, they say. And UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson battered twice as lawmakers from his own party and the opposition press ahead to stop his plan for leaving the European Union without an agreement and turn down his call for an election. But first, let's begin right here in Seoul. An opening ceremony for the 8th Vice Ministerial Seoul Defense Dialogue was held on Thursday, aimed at facilitating discussions on situations on the Korean Peninsula and the surrounding region, as well as peacekeeping operations and cybersecurity. The forum brought together hundreds of officials and experts from around 50 countries and 2 international organizations. Now, in his keynote address, Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do highlighted the achievements of the comprehensive military agreement signed almost 12 months ago in alleviating inter-Korean tensions. Now, this despite the series of firings of short-range ballistic missiles by North Korea. He highlighted the efforts to build a mutual trust in the region through dialogue, while also pointing out that South Korea's security strategy lies in achieving peace by building strong military strength and defense capability. The U.S.-South Korea alliance is the foundation for peace and prosperity in the Korean Peninsula and throughout the region. That's U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Harry Harris in a keynote speech at the Indian Ocean Region Conference in the Maldives on Wednesday. Now, the former U.S. Navy officer referred to the DMZ encounter between the leaders of South Korea, North Korea, and the United States back in June, saying that was a standing proof of the strength of the U.S.-South Korea alliance for peace and prosperity. He then went on to say that the South Korean President Moon Jae-in's new Southern policy centered around people, peace, and prosperity is in natural harmony with the U.S. vision for Indo-Pacific. Over in Washington, U.S. President Donald Trump has made himself clear once again that he's not looking for a regime change in North Korea and that he believes North Korea has tremendous economic potential. While addressing journalist questions at the White House Wednesday, Mr. Trump lumped North Korea and Iran together as he suggested the possibility of striking a deal with them.
We're not looking for a regime change. They have tremendous potential, and I think they're going to want to take advantage of that potential. I really believe that. I think North Korea is a country with tremendous potential, and I think they're going to want to take advantage of it. So we'll see what happens. But
such remarks are seen as a gesture to get the North back to the negotiating table amid a deadlock in the North Korea-U.S. denuclearization talks, and as analysts say, time is not in Trump's favor. Now, during the G7 summit held in France late last month, Trump also commented on the regime's potential while fielding questions on Iran. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is back home in Beijing from his 3-day visit to Pyongyang without having met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. According to Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency Thursday, Wang Yi met with Ri Soo-yong, a senior official in charge of international affairs for the North ruling party, and asked him to extend greetings from Chinese President Xi Jinping and his wife, Peng Liyuan. Now, that may be a hint that Wang did not directly meet with Kim Jong-un. Observers say that this could be because Wang's visit was strictly for working purposes to prepare for Kim's visit to China next month. China celebrates its 70th anniversary on October 1st, and Pyongyang and Beijing celebrate their 70th anniversary of diplomatic ties on October 6th. Some observers believe that Kim could visit China for another summit with Xi Jinping next month. Let's move over to Hong Kong. After months of violent protests there, its leader, Carrie Lam, has finally and fully withdrawn the controversial bill that would have allowed extradition to mainland China. The latest decision marks a dramatic U-turn for Lam, who for months had refused to withdraw that bill, but the Hong Kong public is far from satisfied. Our Lee Seung-jae has the full story.
Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has finally withdrawn the controversial extradition bill, which has triggered months of often violent protests in the city. The announcement came on Wednesday in a televised public address by the chief executive.
First, on withdrawing the bill. On June 15th, I announced that the bill was suspended and later reiterated that the bill is dead and that all the legislative work had come to a complete halt.
However, Lam refused to give ground on the protesters' four other demands, which include dropping charges against the protesters.
Fourth, on dropping charges against protesters and rioters and shelving prosecutions. I have explained that this is contrary to the rule of law and is not acceptable. It also goes against the basic law, which states that criminal prosecutions must be handled by the Department of Justice, free from any interference.
Lam had initially suspended the extradition bill in June, but that suspension of the bill did not satisfy the protesters, who demanded the bill's complete withdrawal. In the past few weeks, the protests have become increasingly violent as the young protesters felt the government was refusing to even consider their demands. However, one pro-Beijing lawmaker says Lam's withdrawal may not stem their anger because the movement has now become about more than just a bill. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong leader has denied that she had offered to resign over her handling of the crisis, despite a leaked recording released on Monday indicating she could possibly quit. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, in a little bit of time, President Moon Jae-in heads to Laos, the final leg of his three-nation Southeast Asia tour. Now, there he will sit down with his Laotian counterpart and also unveil the Korea-Mekong Region Cooperative Initiative. Our Park Hee-jun is with the president, and she files this report.
President Moon Jae-in completes his ASEAN tour with his final stop, Laos. After visiting Thailand and Myanmar earlier this week, President Moon arrives in Laos on Thursday for an unprecedented visit by a South Korean leader.
The trip to Laos between September 5th and September 6th is the first state visit by a South Korean president. We anticipate the two countries will strengthen cooperation in development, infrastructure, agriculture, and health care, while accelerating South Korea-Mekong cooperation by revealing our vision in the country which contains the greatest length of the Mekong River.
With a population of around 7 million, Laos has a GDP of $18.5 billion as of 2018. Dubbed the Battery of Asia for its abundant water resources from the Mekong River, Laos is attracting an increasing amount of foreign investment. And its economy maintains an annual economic growth rate in the 6% range. President Moon will hold a summit with his counterpart Bunyang Vorchith in the capital, Vientiane. They're to discuss ways to tighten their bilateral relations and to improve cooperation between Korea and ASEAN and between Korea and the Mekong region. And with Laos being a powerhouse for hydroelectric power, running 61 power plants and exporting 65% of its electricity to neighboring countries, the two sides are expected to seek stronger cooperation in that area. They will also sign MOUs on agriculture, ICT, and startups. And later in the day, when Moon visits the Mekong River, he will lay out a more detailed vision for relations between Korea and the Mekong region. That region includes countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Vietnam. With his visit to Laos, President Moon fulfills his promise of visiting all ASEAN nations within his term. And as Laos is a relatively niche market, President Moon seeks to increase Korea's presence in the country, particularly by tapping into the infrastructure industry along the Mekong River. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News, Yangon.
South Korea will be amending a range of regulations to promote a fair economy a key policy goal of the Moon administration so that people can feel the government's achievements in their daily lives. In a meeting this morning, senior ruling party lawmakers and top government officials laid out 23 tasks in 7 areas, which include improving corporate governance, strengthening consumer protection, and boosting cooperation between small and big companies for mutual prosperity. Now, the two sides said they share the view that a fair economy will be the basis for achieving growth through innovation and fair distribution by rooting out irregularities and sitting at the principles of a market economy. The fair economy is one of the 3 pillars of the government's economic development strategy, aiming to level the playing field in both the economy and society. The Japanese government held a briefing session for foreign embassy officials on radioactive wastewater building up at the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. A total of 27 diplomatic officials from 22 different countries, including South Korea, were present at Wednesday's session, during which Tokyo explained that it has not yet decided on how to dispose the wastewater. Now, the Tokyo government also explained that the wastewater generated in damaged reactor buildings is cleared of most radioactive materials. Tokyo has last held such a briefing in October last year. It was about a week ago that the South Korean government posted a video online showing Japan's use of forced labor during World War II. The video now has more than 100,000 views, getting sympathy and attention from all around the world. Our Kan Young-woo tells us more.
It's not your fault. That's the first sentence that appears in an online video about the issue of Japan's use of Koreans for forced labor during World War II. It was uploaded last week by the Korean Culture and Information Service, a state-run agency, and at 4 minutes long, it's gotten more than 130,000 views. Its message: the use of forced labor during Japanese colonial period should not be overlooked in history. Quoting victims and witnesses, the video shows faded photographs of the people forced to work for Japan and explains how they lacked basic human rights. Then it compares how Germany and Japan have dealt differently with their World War II atrocities. Berlin took responsibility for its war crimes, apologized to the victims, and compensated them for their suffering. On the other hand, after the South Korean Supreme Court ruled in favor of Korean victims and ordered Japanese companies to pay them damages, Tokyo retaliated with economic sanctions against Seoul. The video ends with a U.S. professor's quote: "Unless Japan makes more consistent and far-reaching efforts to achieve reconciliation with its neighbors, Asia will always be precariously close to another economic or military crisis." The video is provided in both Korean and English, and it can be found on the official YouTube channel KoreaNet or the Facebook page Korea Clickers. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
The UK Parliament has again rebuffed British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The House of Commons has approved a bill that requires the legislature to approve a no-deal Brexit from the European Union. For more on this and other news around the world, let's turn to our Kim Da-mi. So Tommy, tell us more about Boris Johnson being defeated by his own party and the opposition twice in one day.
Right, Kan Young, members of parliament have backed a bill that blocks a no-deal Brexit. So that means the bill will push the Brexit deadline to January 31st next year. Opposition members of parliament and Tory rebels ensured the bill passed by a margin of 28 votes on Wednesday. The bill will force UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson to ask for an extension beyond the October 31st deadline if a deal has not been agreed with the EU. The Prime Minister responded by calling for a general election, but lawmakers also rejected Johnson's proposal of early elections for October 15. The UK is expected to deliver its stance on Brexit to EU leaders at the EU Council Summit on October 17th. EU officials have been treating a no-deal Brexit as a potential disaster scenario. The European Commission on Wednesday stepped up its no-deal preparations with emergency funds to help businesses and workers hit by the UK's departure. As Hurricane Dorian moves up the east coast of the United States, North Carolina has also declared state of emergency on Wednesday. Over 2 million people in Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina are under mandatory evacuations. The Category 2 storm is forecast to bring heavy winds and torrential rain until Friday local time before heading out into the Atlantic. Earlier this week, the killer storm pounded the Bahamas, leaving at least 7 people dead. The U.S. Central Bank said in its Beige Book report that the country is witnessing economic growth at a modest pace, similar to the evaluations made in June and July. Kim Yo-sun tells us more.
The U.S. Federal Reserve says the country's economy is expanding at a modest pace. That's according to the Beige Book, which is a report on the U.S. economy based on reports from the Fed's 12 regional banks released on Wednesday. This is a similar evaluation as in June and July and is in contrast to April's evaluation that said the economic activities grew at a slight to moderate pace. The report also explained that manufacturing was down slightly from the previous period. Despite the prolonged uncertainties over tariff and trade policies, the central bank said most U.S. businesses remain optimistic about their prospects. Meanwhile, the U.S. trade deficit narrowed slightly in July, according to the Commerce Department on Wednesday. It said U.S. exports increased in July to $207.4 billion, $1.2 billion more than in June, while imports dropped $400 million from the previous month to stand at $261.4 billion. Analysts say this is due to a decrease in demand for capital goods driven by America's sluggish manufacturing industry. Imports from China, the prime target of President Trump's trade offensive launched last year, fell 1.9% to $39 billion, the lowest level since April. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Video sharing website YouTube has been fined a record $170 million by a U.S. regulator for violating children's privacy laws. YouTube had been accused of collecting data on children under 13 without parental consent. The Federal Trade Commission said the data was used to help advertisements target children by using cookies or personal identifiers, which violates the 1998 Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Google, which owns YouTube, agreed to pay the fine.
Well, time now for our Life and Info segment where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. And it's Thursday, so we're going to focus on culture and arts here in South Korea. So introduce you to some fun events coming up soon. We have our Lee Min-sun in the studio for us. Hello there, Min-sun. So you bring with you some munching and some film. So how can we go wrong with that?
Hi, Gon-young. Today I'm going to introduce a film festival with a unique theme of food. It's the Seoul International Food Film Festival, which takes place from this Friday, September 6th to Thursday, September 12th at Seoul Namsan Gugakdang and Daehan Cinema in Chungmuro. First held in 2015, the festival hopes to understand and communicate various aspects of life and culture from around the world through a familiar medium of food and film. It's a non-competitive international film festival with competitive section and aims to raise awareness on sustainable and healthy eating. It is meant to be a relaxing experience where people can simply enjoy films and food. A total of 67 feature and short films from around the world will be presented, along with sideline events like cooking and tasting events and guest talk shows.
So, Vincent, as we know, the highlight of any film festival is the opening film. So what is the opening film for this festival, and what's special at this year's festival?
This year's opening film is Food Fighter by Australian director Dan Goldberg. It's a documentary film about the environmental problems caused by food waste, while some people in Australia still have difficulty securing enough food to eat each day. A special reception party, Australian Night, follows the screening to celebrate the food, film, lifestyle, and culture of the country. Also marking the 100th anniversary of Korean film, some classic Korean films about the food and related issues from the 1950s to the 1990s are being shown. It will be a chance to explore and understand the changes in Korean society and culture through food and film.
So it's not just about just food and munching and eating, because initially that's what I thought, but just thinking about various societal changes and societal problems caused by food waste and whatnot. You mentioned various sideline events. What are some that you would recommend to us?
Right. The signature program of the festival is a dining cinema where audiences can watch movies and enjoy the food that is featured in the film. A total of 8 dining cinema programs are offered at 2 locations, the country yard of Seoul Namsan Gugakdang and rooftop of Daehan Cinema. On the cinema rooftop, more light drinks and finger food are available, like craft beer, wine, and traditional Korean liquor with snacks. If you want to have more than just snacks, you can try programs at Gugakdang that offer Australian barbecue, French cuisine, Spanish and Korean dishes, along with beer, wine, or Korean liquor. Because there are a limited number of seats for these programs, those interested should make a reservation at the festival's website. Tickets for the dining cinema range from 15,000 to 30,000 won, which is about $12 to $25. Film directors, critics, and chefs will also give talks after movie screenings to discuss various topics about food, culture, healthy eating, and sustainability. And there are also free outdoor screenings at Namsan-Gol Hanok Village that show short documentaries and animated films.
Well, I think it's a wonderful chance to check out films, and if you like eating and if you want to bring awareness to various issues, it will be a wonderful opportunity for us to go check it out. Thank you for that useful information, Min-san, and we hope to see you again next week. Yeah. All right, now let's take a quick look at some cultural events that are coming up in South Korea.
Good morning. Northwestern regions are having a rainy Thursday with a heavy rain advisory being in place for Incheon and parts of Gyeonggi-do province as well as Jeju Island. But rain has stopped here in Seoul about an hour ago, but it's forecast to rain again as the day goes on. In central parts of the country, we'll see heavy rain until tomorrow afternoon. Southern provinces will receive rainfall until later today. Now, the Korean Peninsula will be the target for the 13th typhoon of the season, Lingling. Typhoon Lingling will bring strong winds and heavy rain to the country, affecting Jeju Island first before traveling along the west coast through this weekend. So Korea will need to stay on high alert this weekend. Typhoon Lingling is expected to deliver wind speeds of 35 to 45 meters per second to the south and west coast. And that's strong enough to topple trees and knock down walls, so take extra precautions. Today's daily highs will go up higher than Wednesday. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now, but stay tuned to Arirang TV for the day's headlines all throughout the day. Take care.
"2019 has been a big year for international diplomacy in Korea, and there are profound exchanges happening between different nations every day. With a focus on cooperation and exchange, the show seeks to reinforce relationships between Korea and the world. Join us as we connect with foreign ambassadors to better understand Korean politics, economy, culture, and more. The Diplomat. How is the Fourth Industrial Revolution changing various industries in Korea? By exploring various domestic economic patterns and scientific advancements, we'll get a glimpse at how trends in Korea may spread all around the world. We'll bring you a full analysis on the outlook of the future and how Korea will be the center of this change. Money Monster. Global content creators from all around the world have collaborated with Arirang TV to introduce every inch of Korea. Come on an exciting adventure to experience the live energy on each trip. The creators will also broadcast and share their trips live on their individual channels, so don't miss Travel Agency Season